Greetings, fellow pseudo-intellectuals. I've listened to all of the rest of the videos that have been up to date posted with respect to this video by Kingheathen, and found them lacking. I found them basically the same as other videos put forth by the Christians, which essentially decline into regurgitations of dogma, circular reasoning, and gibberish. But that's not their fault, because they've been asked to do something that's not possible, which is to explain rationally the Trinity. The problem is the Trinity is an invention of man. If one looks at what Christ says, what he doesn't, so far as I'm aware, in his own words, say that he is the Son of God and that he is God and the same as God and been around since the beginning of time. He essentially would lead one to believe that he is an instrument of God. He says that he was sent by God, refers to God as his Father, which, to some extent, he's all of our fathers. But the Trinity itself was an invention of man to try to sell Christianity to pagans. One of the more interesting sections of the Bible, and I think one of the more mysterious and fascinating passages, is John 1 through 5. And it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men," and so forth. What's interesting then, and in this version of the Bible, and this is the Revised Standard Edition that I got in 1964, the word "word" is capitalized, and I've read on this a little bit, and that is basically Jesus. What's interesting about this is that it comes at the beginning of John. It's not referred to anywhere else, and it is totally unnecessary. And for that reason, and what you've got here is an effort to equate Jesus with God, which is unnecessary when you look at the rest of the writing, unless you're trying to convince somebody that Jesus was God and divine, and which is only necessary if you're trying to sell this outside the context of the Jews, and in other words, to the pagans. If you look at the rest of that gospel and the other gospels, they essentially refer to the few years, with some exceptions, the Egyptian exile or whatever, but basically they refer to the about 3 years that Jesus went around preaching. From the time he started to preach, you met John. This book starts with, other than that, the passage starts with John the Baptist and goes up through the resurrection. If you look at all the rest of those, the teachings and the acts and whatever Jesus said, it's not necessary to equate him with God. He was preaching to the Jews. He was trying to reform Judaism, and what he says is basically entirely to be understood within the context of Judaism. And even refers to the reference to casting pearls before swine is a reference to giving these teachings to people outside of Judaism. Why would you want to do that? Why would you cast these pearls before swine? So the only reason you would need to come up with trying to equate Jesus with God is if you're trying to sell to pagans. And then you have the issue of which explains it really, because then you've got a man walking around, and you've got a reference to the Holy Spirit. You know, there's a Holy Spirit and there's God. I can see where, you know, maybe those two things might be not inconsistent with each other, but then you've got the man walking around. You have to make them the same thing. You have to create, if you want people who are pagans to follow Jesus, you have to make Jesus a deity. And that is simply what they did. So any argument outside of that context is going to fail, because you can only talk about things in some abstract level that is written by people well after the fact, and that can only be taken on faith. So therefore, in response to Kingheathen's question, the answer is that the Trinity was invented by man to sell Christianity to pagans. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Until next time, adios.